I want to introduce myself. My name is Bob Forman. I had the opportunity to be the Alumni Director, the privilege and the honor of being Alumni Director at the University of Michigan for some 28 years. And I introduced myself not out of my sense of ego, but there are no name plates up here, and I didn't want any of you to think I was Jim Brandstatter. So it was appropriate to do that. Now, since there aren't any name tags or plates up here, I'm going to do something that's departing a bit from what I had intended. I'm going to introduce the head table so that as you peer at these guys as we go through this roast, you won't make a mistake of thinking, for example, that Earl Morrall is Don Canham. I just want to be able to do that in the event that you don't know everybody that well. So with that in mind and giving a very simplistic introduction, well, first of all, let me make a kind of public service announcement. In your program are little descriptive paragraphs about each of our roasters. And since they were written by each of our roasters, you can be sure that they're telling you all that you need to know about themselves. And my public service announcement is that I'm aware that there are some people here from Ohio State. And if you will identify yourselves, the Michigan people can read to you the things that are in the program. And therefore, I won't have to read them from up here. And Norm and Earl, I want you to know, in deference to the two of you, we didn't include another university that we might have otherwise put in that category, the University of the Flintstones. I'm going to start, though, by introducing folks to you. We're missing two people. Joe Schmidt and Bill Bonds are not here. They left about noon today, so I think they might arrive at any moment. And either that or they're roasting some other poor devil that at another hotel who can't quite understand why his name is not Kramer. Let me start at my left and your right, because it is such a privilege to have a representative of our sister institution, a teammate of Ron's with the Green Bay Packers, a All-American, a great representative of the state of Michigan and Michigan State University. I'd like you to meet Norm Masters. Norm, just a second. I think it's a bit ironic that Norm owns 25 Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises at a McDonald's roast. The next gentleman here is a man that I've had the pleasure of reading his books and watching on television, as you have. I've also been in audiences where he's been the honored speaker here in Ann Arbor. I can remember, Dave, not long, years ago actually, at the United Fund annual banquet, you regaled us with great stories, and all of us who have come to know and appreciate Dave Diles can be honored that he's here with us tonight. I also want, before I ask Dave to stand, to point out that David Diles Jr. is here with us, Dr. David Diles. And David, we're delighted that you're our sister institution at Eastern Michigan, and obviously you take after your mother. We're delighted to see you here. And now may I introduce Dave Diles. Dave. Jerry Green is somebody that I admire for a lot of reasons, not the least of which he is a columnist and a reporter that tells it like it is, honestly, and we've all enjoyed his work in the Detroit News over the years. He's also a guy that took a job and stuck with it. And in this day and age, I admire somebody with that tradition and that longevity. So may we welcome and greet Jerry Green. Jerry. I'm not going to introduce the next guy. I think some of you know him. We'll introduce him later. All I can say is that the committee, in trying to pick a person to be roasted tonight, happened to see this man on the middle of State Street with a leather sweater that said, "I work for food." And that's the only reason the committee can give for having picked him. But we'll get back to whomever he is in a moment. The next man is, of course, not Earl Morrall. He is what's called an icon. And somebody can try to explain to Kramer what an icon is. Or, for that matter, the guys from Ohio State. Thank God Bo was sitting up here because somebody had to cut Kramer's meat. Anyway, how the hell do you introduce greatest coach that we think in our contemporary life, Coach Bo Schembechler? How in the hell Canham and Schembechler bought those identical sport coats? At the Isla Lee resale shop. Okay. If there was another icon in Michigan, it's obviously Don Canham. If there was a man who personified creativity and innovation in athletic administration, he's the giant, the pioneer in that kind of view of how you market and produce extraordinary response to intercollegiate athletics in America. Don Canham. Don?
So nice to him.
Kramer wants to know why I was so nice to Canham. Hell, I'm still scared of him. Well, the next guy is a guy that you've all admired. We've watched him again at Michigan State, where he indeed was an All-American, a great representative of that institution as an All-American, a great professional football player, quarterback on a team that won 17 straight games. He wears those Super Bowl rings, and we're glad to have him with us tonight, Earl Morrall. Earl? Everyone else here has been either a legend or an icon. The next guy, all I can say is he married well. I've made a career out of poking fun at Brandstatter, and I'm going to publicly tell you why. Jim doesn't believe this story, but so help me God, it's a true story. I have suffered for 50 years from an event that occurred about that time ago, 50 years ago. I was a young high school-age student in East Lansing, Michigan, and Professor Arthur Brandstatter at Michigan State University hired me to do some interior painting using a roller brush, a new invention at the time, in their home in East Lansing. They had a baby. That baby was in a crib. This is a true story. Mrs. Brandstatter, beautiful, beautiful woman. Obviously, Jim didn't take after her. Beautiful woman. She helps me paint. She actually showed me how to do it with a roller brush. We ran out of paint. The kid is in the crib. She said, I'll go get some paint. If the baby wakes up, true story, pick him up, maybe burp him. Well, look at him. You should have seen him as a baby. I picked that kid up. I got a hernia, a bad back, So for 50 years, this guy has been the subject and the cause of physical discomfort. On the other hand, I know no one in this business that I admire better than Jim Brandstatter. He brings both his insightful for a guy that, by his own admission, backed up Dan Deerdorf for 2 years. Now, he doesn't say how far back. Schembechler once told me that Deerdorf played with 2 broken legs, a broken collarbone, before they still wouldn't put Brandstatter in the game. But anyway, Jim Brandstatter. Well, welcome to the Brandstatter roast. You know, these roasts, I've got to explain to you very quickly, there's something different between a roast and a testimonial. A testimonial is when you get somebody that's charismatic, articulate, young enough that you don't have to ask your grandfather who the hell he was, and that people genuinely like and admire and get up and say nice things about him. A roast is just getting somebody off the street that'll come in here with a bunch of icons and legends, and they poke fun at him. Now, we had a roast for Ronald McDonald House not long ago. We had, who do we have? We had Terrell Burton and Jerry Hamill. So that shows you, you don't have to have quality in here to have these roasts. And so there's a little bit of a debate among the committee as to how, I'm sure it's a question you all have, why was Kramer picked? Well, other than the humanitarian aspect of this, I work for food, I'll tell you how he's picked. Brandstatter. Brandstatter called the committee. Brandstatter had stopped at the I-94 rest stop out there by Ypsilanti and seen Kramer's name on the wall. Ron Kramer, old 87. Call collect. Somebody had written underneath it, is that his age or his IQ? Some other guy had written, I guess a guy had written and said, I know him, it's both. So, I believe that's probably the right story. I can believe that Kramer wrote it, and I can believe Brandstatter was out reading those things. To Kramer's credit, he had written it in the women's restroom, and God knows what Brandstatter was doing in there. There are a lot of folks here tonight that should be introduced. This is, after all, a University of Michigan-oriented audience. It's obvious that Ron was not our first choice, because it is a Michigan event. We had asked Gerald Ford and Mike Wallace and James Earl Jones. We got down to Madonna. We're getting close to Kramer, and we got to Papa Doc Duvalier, the dictator at 80 that actually got a degree from the School of Public Health at Michigan. If you think of an oxymoron, think of that. And they asked Papa Doc, and they knew he was dead. And then they asked Kramer. So that's how far down the list they got. Well, anyway, our roasters are about to take off, and I'm going to use the kind of academic approach to doing this. I was going to use it alphabetically as they're listed in the program. And then it struck me that because this is a university-oriented audience, that I'll use the grade point averages and the IQ combination of each of these people. And then we'll start at one end of the spectrum or the other, and you can guess by whom I introduce first which end we're starting with. Jim? Jim Brandstatter, ladies and gentlemen. Can't tell you what a thrill it is for me to be here tonight.
Came to roast Ron Kramer, and I got nailed. But I want you all to know and think about this seriously. For 30 years now, Bob Forman has used that babysitting story. He's gotten great mileage out of it for all those years. Personally, I think he's lying. I don't think he had anything to do with it. I wouldn't allow this man to get near me when I was a child. And my mother wouldn't have either. She's too nice. But and a lot of what Bob says is true. I mean, look at the dais. I'm the only one here who's not on Social Security. How did I get invited to this group, you know? And think about it. I mean, legendary Earl Morrall, Don Canham, the guy that really brought collegiate football, collegiate athletics into the 20th century. Bo Schembechler, an icon, as they say. Ron Kramer, Ron Kramer, they retired Ron Kramer's jersey. There are only 4 jerseys that Michigan retired. Ron Kramer's one of them.
5.
5?
Yeah.
Who's the 5th?
Jerry Ford.
Oh, I forgot. I forgot. That's when we needed a donation. Right, Don? Bob Forman, the director of the largest living alumni organization in the world. In the world. And he can't remember who they roasted last week. Do something. Jerry Green, here's a guy that's been one of the few guys who's been to every Super Bowl ever played. That's a true story. Jerry Green. What are you pointing at, Jerry? My wife, Robbie, hasn't been there.
No, but she's taking care of you.
Nowatzki scored a touchdown for the Baltimore Colts in one of them, didn't he?
He threw it.
Good, Jerry, you want to step up and do it? Like I said, forgive them, they're all old. Then there's Dave Diles. This guy's written books. I mean, and he's been a broadcaster, ABC network guy. I mean, imagine that. And Norm Masters, a player for the Green Bay Packers, the legendary Vince Lombardi, played next to Ron Kramer. I mean, I don't know why I'm here. And because one of the members of this dais, and I'm not going to mention who because it would embarrass him, once said to my face that I was an embarrassment to college football. So it is an honor for me to be here amongst these luminaries at the dais. They truly are my heroes, and it'll be 10, 12 years before I go on Social Security. They got 4 or 5 years in on me already. Anyway, when Tom Hentz called me up to do this, I said, "Who's it for?" He said, "Ron Kramer." I said, "I'm busy." He said, "Terry Barr and I really want you to do it." I said, "Tom, I know you and Terry are wonderful guys, and I love you both dearly. You're great Michigan men, but truly, I'm busy." And they asked me what I had to do, and I said, "Well, I think Robbie has me do the wash on Friday nights." Then I was asked by 2, 3 other people if I wouldn't mind, being on the dais, and I said, "Sure." Okay, finally I said, "I'll do it." And now I can understand why. I mean, think about this. You got a roast, and you figure you're going to show up and do it for a guy like Ron Kramer. 2 guys haven't even shown up.
And they live next door to you.
Think about that. They live next door to each other and they haven't shown up. Tells you how much Ron means to them. But I wanted to find out some things about Ron. And since I've been lucky enough to do Detroit Lions football for a number of years, I was able to find out from the Lions' perspective, the broadcast crew at Green Bay. And one of those guys that broadcasts for Green Bay is Max McGee. And Max has been broadcasting for years with Jim Irwin over there, and I've had the opportunity to see them during Lions Green Bay games, so I figured I'd call Max up, and I said, "Max, give me some good stuff about Ron." So I called up in Wisconsin, and Max answered the phone. I said, "Max, Jim Brandstatter, Lions Network." He said, "Hey, Jim, how are you?" I said, "Fine, good." So listen, you're roasting Ron Kramer, and I need some stories on him. He goes, "Who?" I said, Ron Kramer, don't you remember the guy that supposedly you crawled out of the, training camp and down the rope and went drinking and stuff? Never did that with Ron Kramer. And I said, well, Max, why in the world would Ron, tell these stories and do that stuff? And he said, because Ron truly has made his reputation telling everybody lies. None of it's the truth. You thought he was a great player, right? I know the truth. Tom Mentz was the great player. Ron Kramer just showed up. He laid on the pile so that Jerry Green would say, hey, that's Kramer, number 87. Jerry didn't know what the hell was going on out there. He just saw a guy laying on the pile and said, Kramer did something good there. Anyway, when I got to know Ron after I was a player and I realized that what a great legendary guy this was and what a great player he was, I said, this is one of the great moments to have the opportunity to meet with Ron Kramer. And one thing about Ron, he's a gregarious, lovable, wonderful guy. And I was, with great respect, the first time I actually met the Ron Kramer. You gotta understand, when you play for Michigan, you meet the Ron Kramer. And Bo, to this day, says, Kramer of Michigan. That's how he announces it. John Facenda, the great voice of NFL films, would say Ron Kramer. And the voice, the tundra of Green Bay. This is Ron Kramer. This man's bigger than life. And as a young man, graduated school, had an opportunity to meet Ron. Ron had heard me do some broadcasts, walked up and said, Mr. Kramer, it's a pleasure to meet you. He leaned over and kissed me right on the lips. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know, that was a scary moment. Then I got to know Ron as a guy that would go over to Don Canham's every Friday prior to home games when Don was the athletic director. I was asked if I would go tend bar, and Ron and I were the bartenders at Canham's parties. And it was a great thrill until I realized that Ron never really tended bar. Ron was the party. He'd walk around with a camera. He'd shoot pictures of everybody and everything that moved. He shot pictures of the hors d'oeuvre plate, didn't he, Peg? They've got pictures hanging on Canham's wall of the hors d'oeuvre plate and I'm the one tending bar. Peg and I finally had to get an extra guy this year to come over because Kramer never actually tended bar there. And that's a true story. It may not be very funny, but it's true. Last, and I'm getting out of here, and it gets serious here. Here's a legendary guy, okay? And it's true. At Michigan, there is no bigger name than Ron Kramer. He's in the midst of Yost and Schembechler and the Wisterts and all the great names in Michigan. Ron Kramer is one of them. Yet Ron Kramer, I can tell you this, is a regular guy and a tremendously generous human being. Why is he special and why are we roasting him tonight? Real simple. Because he's special because he doesn't think he is. And that's why we love Ron Kramer. And that's why it's a delight to be here tonight and roast my hero.
He's trained well.
I really had just made up that story about the rest stop, but having seen that, you never know, do you? I know some of you are getting concerned about how long this program is going to go on, since we've only had one roaster. You may want to take a break, and well, I can assure you that Ron will take 2 or 3 before somebody has to take him to the restroom, but before we get through here. But you might call your babysitters if you're thinking about it. However, we are running ahead of time because the planners of this meeting have everything timed perfectly. They even had timing for Brandstatter's standing ovation, timing for laughter after his comments. So we're running way ahead of time at the moment, and we'll be okay. I'm going to abandon this idea of IQ because I don't, obviously we made our point. And I'm going to ask the guy that Brandstatter is referring to, Jerry Green, to get up here and talk about Ron. Jerry?
Jim, the check came today. Thank you for contributing. I am neither a legend nor am I an icon. I'm just a sports writer. That means I'm negative, I'm cynical, I'm suspicious, I'm skeptical. Sometimes I might even be sneaky.
And that's the truth.
It's absolutely the truth. I came to Ann Arbor in 1956 when this guy was a senior. It was 44 years ago, and I came out of the United States Navy. I'd been educated in the East. I had these grand ideas about athletic purity. Athletes were saints. They were role models. They were all the things that I imagined. I had these illusions. And this man single-handedly destroyed all my illusions and turned me into a negative, cynical, suspicious person. And I have examples too. I got here in 56, and I came out here and I went into Michigan Stadium on Labor Day 1956 before the football season. I stood there in awe. It was 4 times larger than Brown University Field, where I had watched a guy named Paterno play some quarterback. I stood there in awe. I saw a new press box rebuilt. I said, gee whiz, Fritz Chrysler did that for me. And then I got a book and started reading about Michigan athletics, and the first thing I read was that with my pure ideals, I read about this ruffian who had tried to beat up the entire state of Ohio the previous November while I was overseas, Ron Kramer. First illusion was destroyed, but I did decide I had to go see this guy and interview him. So I went over to the Sigma Chi house on State Street. Terry Barr led me in the door. Tom Mentz took me upstairs. I went up to meet the great Ron Kramer, the All-America. His picture was on the cover of Sports Illustrated with Tom Mentz's, and I was very nervous, and I said, I want to meet this pure role model. And up in the top floor of the Sigma Chi house, Ron Kramer was sitting there smoking a cigarette. Illusion number 2 was destroyed. I'm going to turn aside right now. Hardly a liar. I tell the truth always.
Well, then tell the truth.
Okay.
It's a joint.
I am still so naive, I don't know the difference. Anyway, a little aside here. Michigan went out to play Iowa, which is on its way to the Rose Bowl that season. Terry Barr was hurt. Mike Shatusky played wingback, scored 2 touchdowns in a 14-10 victory, I believe. 17-14. 17-14. Anyway, Michigan beat Iowa, Forrest Evashevsky's team. I grabbed Mike after the game in Iowa Stadium. I said, I have to do an interview with you. He said, okay, come on with me. And we both lit up. Cigarettes, I believe. Mine was, anyway. That destroyed. Anyway, back to Kramer. I was, I was beginning to get a little skeptical about things and losing some of my purity and my ideals by then. Kramer's injured. I go up to the university hospital with another idea to do a story. I was sneaking into the hospital, I guess. I'd learned things by then. And I saw the nurse, and she pointed me that way, and Ron came in. His leg was up in the air in traction. He said, come on in, come on in. How about a drink? I said, okay, what do you got, Pepsi or, Coca-Cola or what? He said, I got scotch here and bourbon here, and he had it in a little case. By that time, I was ruined. I was ready to cover Morrall in the Super Bowl, and, we went to the game occasionally. But the entire week was party time, and I went to some Rose Bowls with Messrs. Canham and Schembechler. I saw Norm Masters play. Dave Diles was one of my tutors, and he taught me well, but he didn't tell me about any coming out here with ideals. I just want to say in conclusion, after the ruffian bit, the smoking and the booze aspects, that I do not use the word great very often, but I think Ron Kramer was number one. I learned this. He was a great athlete. He was a great person. And I will not, we never got into the business about kissing on the lips.
By the way, Jerry became the sweetheart of Sigma Chi.
Well, thank you, Jerry. If you were cynical enough and mean-spirited enough, you could have been a head football coach. You should have stayed out of the writing game. Speaking of coaches, we've got an audience full of dignitaries tonight. After all, it's Michigan-oriented with some wonderful exceptions audience, and so everybody's distinguished here. But just let me, I'm looking around. I have no list. I just want to point out a few people. Don Lund, 9-letter winner, just like Don. Good to see you here tonight. And unlike Ron had 9 letters, 3 of Ron's, of course, were from the Dean of Students, but our great hockey coach, Al Renfro. Al, and our other great hockey coach, Red Berenson. Red. I know Ron will probably want to do this on his own, but both Terry Barr and Tom Entz have been mentioned, and I'd like the two of them to stand because they were also responsible. Along with Lynn Evans for helping put this roast together tonight. We're grateful to all of them. Bill Martin, our interim athletic director at University of Michigan. Bill, good to have you with us. Now I'd like to have maybe all the guys that played football with Ron at Michigan, at Green Bay, and with the Lions stand so we can see you. Yeah.
Come on. Earl won't stand up. You played with me 1 year.
Yeah, right. Okay.
You don't remember where you played. You played so many places. Janie picked up and moved you every week.
And just because I think it's worth saying, we've got a lot of other Michigan athletes here, former football captains like Jim Conley and others. All the letter winners, former letter winners at the University of Michigan, stand so we can say hello to all of you. And then an Indiana fellow Big Tenor, Tom Nowatzki. Tom, you can stand and say hello to you. Now, I think there's 2 people at table 19 and 1 at 27 we haven't introduced, and that'll take care of the entire audience tonight. Kramer, this must be the sum total of all your friends here tonight. There can't be anyone else outside of this room. All right, let me now introduce to you a guy that wears World Championship rings, played in the with the Green Bay Packers on those famous Lombardi championship teams, from Michigan State University, former All-American, Norm Masters. Norm?
Well, you know, I was really excited about getting this invitation, and the reason for that is because it's for a good cause, and Ron was involved, and of course, I've been a friend of Ron's for 40 years, and what got me excited is I thought for sure that I was going to get some sort of medal or award. And alas, it always turns out that these functions are honoring the so-called skill position. You know, the guy that runs the ball, catches the ball, and throws the ball. And I thought about that. They never honor any of the linemen, but I thought about that, and it dawned on me that the average fan doesn't know, but in those positions, those guys are the least brightest on the team. these guys, you have to watch them carefully. And when you talk about these positions, you have to talk about Ron, for example, in terms of his background and how he fits into that category. Because when Ron was at East Detroit, he went out for the football team in high school, and he said to the coach, he said, "Coach, I like to play football." And the coach says, "Well, okay, Ron." He said, "What'd you like to play?" He says, "Well, I'd like to be the quarterback." And coach says, "Okay, Ron, here's the football. Do you think you could pass it?" "Gee, Coach, I don't think I could swallow it." Now you know the rest of the story. Ron is a tight end. You know, Ronnie's had a lot of injuries. He's had 2 knees, a hip, 2 operations on his back, and the only thing that always made me wonder about, where Ron was coming from is, where he found some of these doctors. The first doctor he went to, he said, "Doctor, I got these bad knees. What you can do for me?" And the doctor said, "Ron, take off all your clothes, go and stand in front of that window and stick out your tongue." And Ron goes over there, he's standing in his birthday suit, and he's about there 3, 4, 5 minutes. He finally says, "Hey, Doc," he said, "what does this do for my knees?" And the doctor said, "Nothing." He says, "I'm just mad at my neighbor." The next doctor this guy went to shows you the, stand a little back? Oh. The next doctor that he went to, and I don't know where he's finding these guys, and this guy was a classic. Ryan said, "I got to lose weight." He said, "I'm 60 pounds overweight." And he said, "With my legs and everything else," he said, I'll either be bedridden or I'm going to die. And he said, "I got to lose this weight." And he said, "I've tried everything." The doctor said, "Don't worry, Ron." He says, "I have a diet that guarantees that you'll lose whatever you want to lose." He said, "You can lose 30 pounds a month on this diet, and you can eat whatever you want." Ryan says, "You got to be kidding me." He says, what's the hook here?" And the doctor said, "Well," he says, "there's no hook." He says, "But you have to take all this food through your rectum." Ryan said, "You got to be kidding." He says, "But I'm willing to try anything." 30 days go by, and then comes Ron. "Doctor, doctor, doctor." He said, "I've lost 30 pounds. He said, "This is just terrific." Doctor said, "Good for you, Ron." He said, "Another 30 days, you'll meet your goal." "Thank you, doctor." So 30 days comes back. He comes in. "Doctor, doctor, doctor, I've lost the other 30 pounds. Doctor says, "Good for you, Ron." He says, "Can I ask you one question?" "What's that?" He says, "What the hell is this?" He says, "Oh, I'm just chewing gum." Then, as we all know, Ron is as we know, one of the best athletes that ever played sports. And of course, as we've already been mentioned, Ronnie now is a senior citizen, but he has always been a good golfer. But recently, he was at the golf course, and these 3 young guys were teeing off, and he said, "Listen, do you mind if I join you?" He says, "Not at all, sir." So after a couple of holes, Ron says, "At my age," he said, "you got to go to the bathroom." He said, "So if you don't mind." He said, "Not at all." So he goes off into the woods. These guys look at their watch, and they say, 10, 15 minutes, says, "Where's this guy at?" So they go in there, and there's Ron fumbling around, and the guy says, and Ron looks up, he says, "I'm really embarrassed." He said, at my age, you really have a hard time finding this thing." And the young guy says, with big eyes, says, "Oh my God, that must be tough when you're having sex." And Ron says, "Well, not really." He says, "Then it's a little bigger, and there's 2 of us looking for it." And I guess the last thing that we all know about Ron is he loves to travel, and he loves to take pictures. And this probably personifies, you know, the depth of his education. So anyway, Ron went to see his travel agent recently and said, you know, for the longest time, I've really wanted to go to Spain. He says, but I don't feel comfortable because I can't speak Spanish. And the travel agent said, look, you don't have to worry. He said, the Spanish people are so nice. If you speak softly and slowly and you enunciate your words, he said, they will understand what you're saying. And Ryan said, you know, you've made me feel so comfortable that I'm going to fly over on Air Spain. So Ryan gets in the plane, he's sitting there, and he looks next to this guy and he says, hello, how are you? The guy looks back and he says, I'm fine, how are you? Ron says, great, where are you from? I'm from East Detroit. Ron said, East Detroit? I'm from East Detroit. If you're from East Detroit and I'm from East Detroit, why are we speaking Spanish? Well, we've had a little fun here with Ron, but as I said, I've known Ron for 40 years, and it's a privilege to have played with Ron because he was such a great athlete and one of the reasons why we had such great teams. And more importantly to me, he is a friend for 40 years, and the thing that I can say about Ron is that when he gave you, you know, when you needed Ron, he was there. And when you wanted to count on him, he was there. And I'm just glad to say that he's my friend. Thank you, Ronnie.
Gracias, Ray.
He must have been a hell of a lot of fun in the huddle. You know? Like,
Everybody is.
I'm glad you can't all hear what Ron says half the time. Norm, the only variation of that story I heard about Ron was that the gum he was chewing was bubble gum. I don't. Does anybody want to follow Masters? Earl, it seems only appropriate that a fellow Spartan now to follow him. Again, another legend needing no further introduction, Earl Morrall. Earl.
I got to get some notes here. I always follow the tackles, too. I learned that very, very early in my career. Stay with them. We're here to honor a U of M man, Ron Kramer. Norm says he knew him for 40 years. Well, I think we go back a little farther, Norm. We know him from 45 years ago when we played him 1955. He's one of those guys that the only team we lost to was U of M. We'll give him that credit. He blocked a punt. One of the times they got on our side of the 50, but they did score. But the only thing I can say about Ron, being from University of Michigan and everything else, you know him very well. He always speaks his mind, but that certainly limits his conversation. One thing, as I say about Michigan players, they're very cunning. They're very astute, and I can speak very truly about Ron Kramer because being a tight end, he's very cunning because I heard all the stories over in Green Bay. He hung out with Bart Starr all the time. He always wanted to stay next to the quarterback. When he came over to Detroit, he looked me up. He was right next to me all the time. He wanted me to throw him the football. And he was studious. And he was concerned about his game. And I can still remember one of the games, I threw him a pass. He jumped, hit his fingertips, went off, and he come back. He was very concerned that he didn't hang on to it, didn't catch it. And he looked at me and he says, Earl, what happened? How did I miss it? How did that happen? He says, did I jump too soon? I looked at him and says, no, Ron, you just came down too soon. It took him a while to figure that out.
I'm still trying to do that.
But as I say, we confused him a little bit in Detroit when he came over, played with the Lions, because, you know, he only had to work on Brandstatter throwing the ball there in Green Bay. In Detroit, it all depended. There was Milt Plum, there was myself. Now, he was sort of bewildered because he didn't know who to hang out with. Who should he, hold hands with? Who should he talk to get a pass thrown to him? And it all depended who was looking good that week, who was going to start that week. That's who he hung out with so that he'd get a pass. And these guys from Michigan, you got to say, they're very, very cunning, very astute. Terry Barr, he was sort of off on the side. He wasn't sure, but he finally wised up. He was over there, too, talking to the quarterbacks. Hey, throw me the ball, too. You know, don't just throw it to Ron Kramer. But I always think of times that we were playing, and Ron, he would always come up with these questions. Being from the University of Michigan, he didn't really graduate in math or anything like that. He always tried to figure it out. He kept coming to me and he'd say, Earl, how does this work? He said, you throw me a 2-yard pass, I carry it 96 yards down, score a touchdown, and you get credit for a 98-yard touchdown pass. I had to talk to him very hard and convince him, that's what teamwork is about. You got to work together. And we had a lot of fun working, playing together, and always, when during that fall, when the season came around that Michigan State and Michigan were playing, we'd always get together, There was a question who Ron was going to bet on. We'd always have a dollar bet. It was $1 and the boasting rights. We didn't care about the dollar. All it was the boasting rights that really, really counted. And we had a lot of fun with that, back and forth, the camaraderie that you build. And one thing that he used to tell me about how great the Michigan fans were. He says he kept telling me Michigan, they're greater than the Michigan State fans. And I happened to be at one of the games. And I can tell you that being in Ann Arbor, stadium filled, and all the noise and everything else. And I was there and I thought, well, doggone, I'm going to find one of these avid fans. And there was one yelling at the top of his lungs and this and that. So I went down and I talked to him. I says, hey, Ron Kramer told me that the Michigan fans are the greatest. Greater than Michigan. I think Michigan State fans are better yet. And this guy, he said, oh, Michigan's the greatest. They're wonderful. He said, in fact, he says, I'll show you. He jumps up and he drops his drawers and he bends over and says, look at that tattoo on that cheek. With that, I look, God, that's Bo Schembechler. You are a great fan. He's look at the tattoo on that cheek. I said, oh, man. That's your Heisman Trophy winner, Desmond Howard. Man, you are a great fan. Hey, I recognize that tattoo in the middle. That's Ron Kramer. But I thought I'd bring that up. There is no real rivalry when you get into professional football. There's a lot of fun. Goes back and forth. Naturally, Ron Kramer, as I look at it and see him all the time, you always have to worry. He loves to come up and hug and kiss you. And we had to almost bail him out down at Firestone. One night, he was lagging behind. All of us went back to the hotel we were staying at. We played a golf tournament. And we warned the security guard, this guy's going to be coming in, and I'm sure he'll probably want to give you a hug and kiss. You got to worry about him. We had him primed. Now, this guy had his uniform on and everything else. And so here comes Ron bouncing in the room, and this guy's looking at him, and here comes Ron, comes up, he grabs him, and he holds him, and he gives him a kiss. This guy, he's got his arm. Good thing Ron is strong, because he had his arms pinned. This guy's trying to pull his gun out. But if he could have got his gun out, I think he would have shot him. But we had to work very hard that night to keep Ron from going down to the house, to the jail. because we talked to now, he's just that way. He likes hugging and he likes kissing guys, but don't think anything of it.
You never did.
See, I told you he's always trying to make up the quarterbacks. But we have a lot of fun with him, and I think it's great that we're roasting him here tonight. You're hearing all the insight about Ron Kramer. Tremendous, and I think for him to take all this abuse in honor of the Ron McDonald House, I think is tremendous. I think it speaks for him, what he does in the community, and for what the cause that he's serving, and all of you being here tonight. So it's my pleasure to be part of this. I know you hear a lot more, and Ron Kramer is one of the great ones. Thank you.
Well, I think between Earl and Norm, this crowd has about 10 new jokes. Multiplied by 300 people, there will be, whatever that number turns out to be, that many new jokes till tomorrow as original jokes of your own. So, great jokes. I got the two icons over here. I'm trying to split them up. I don't know quite how to do that. They look like the Wrigley chewing gum twins there. But I think I got to get one of them up here now. And I guess the only way to choose between the two of them is to get the one that kind of came to Michigan first, and then had the good sense to bring the other guy here. And I don't have to tell you about Don Canham. I want Don to come up. I think the finest athletic director in the history of American intercollegiate athletics. Don Canham.
Here, here.
Welcome to the comedy club. Where the hell did all these comedians come from? Anybody know? Forman doesn't surprise me. Incidentally, you know, he does this without a note. He never had a note tonight. I watched him. Down London, I've watched him at banquets across the country for 25 years, and he never has a note. How he does it, I don't know. It's an amazing performance, Robert.
Thank you.
When Kramer was 18 years old, I was his coach. And you can see how inept I was. And that gives you a pretty good idea how old we both are. But the Kramer I remember weighed about 245 pounds, dominated, as Jerry Green says, dominated a football game, dominated a basketball game, and then he could high jump 6 feet 6 inches, throw the discus. I don't know how far he threw it, but it was pretty good, and was a great shot putter. But he probably held the world record for high jumping for a guy his weight. Now look at him. He's got two false knees. What are they, plastic or aluminum?
Those are aluminum. Plastic.
A replaced hip. He's got more stitches in his back and his shoulders than a dozen baseballs. And they call him a legend. He's a legend in Mayo Brothers, I'll bet you money. They'll put him up there when he goes. But one of the things I remember about him most was his senior year, after he'd won 8 letters, 6 in basketball and 6 in football, 2 in track. He came to me and he said, I'm so damn sick of athletics. Do you mind if I don't come out for track? Well, there was a guy in town named Phil Diamond, who some of you know used to run the Liberty Music Shop, and he had dope track meets as a hobby. And about 2 weeks before Kramer came in to see me, he said, Phil had been in, and he said, you know, you're going to lose this track meet to Iowa by a point or 2. So when Kramer came in, I said, well, I'd like you to come out for track. I said, Phil thinks it's going to be a close conference meet, and we're going to need all the points we get. He said, okay. And I said to him, now you don't have to practice much, but show up for the meets. And he took me literally. I didn't see him very often. I'd usually run into him in a hotel bar the night before the meet. And
what were you doing there?
Looking for you. To make a long story short, he got 3rd in the high jump, and we won the meet by 1 point. Now, he jumped 6'4", and before he gets cocky, girls high jump higher than that today, Ron. But anyway, he has been a friend of mine for a lot of years, and Will Perry told me a story, and Tom Mintz and Terry Barr tell me a different story. But one time when Kramer and Mintz were on the cover of Sports Illustrated, Miss America came to town, and the advance agent for Miss America said, "We've got to get a date with Ron Kramer, with Miss America, and we'll get all the camera people ready." Well, Kramer heard that Miss America wanted a date with him, he thought. And so he said, you know, really, and this is a true story according to Perry, he said, "Really, I think I've had enough publicity. Why don't you get a date with the captain of the football team?" And so that's what they did. Well, I asked Barr about that, and Barr said, "Well, that's a true story, except that when they told Miss America that they had a date with Ron Kramer, she says, 'I'm not going out with that gorilla. Are you out of your mind?'" So the captain of the football team went out with Miss America. Well, you know, Kramer's supposedly well known in Ann Arbor. And when I was athletic director no, I was track coach, and Kramer, no, when I was track coach, yeah, there was a guy named, what the hell's the Apple guy's name?
Chestnut.
Mr. Chestnut, who every Friday, he owned a farm, and every Friday he'd bring a couple bushels of apples and give them to Jerry O'Connor to pass out Friday night to the football players after practice. Well, subsequently, Kramer came back to Ann Arbor and lives on an estate, I guess he tells me it is anyway, but he's got an apple tree.
The swamp.
And he thought it'd be a good idea if he started that tradition again. And so about 10 years ago, I guess now, he started bringing Friday night apples. So John Falk was out to see me the other day, and I said, "John, tell me a story about Kramer. I got to go to a roast for the guy." And Falk, he's the equipment manager, he knows every story that was ever told about everybody. And he said, "Well, you know the Chestnut story, don't you?" "Well, I'd heard it." And I said, "Yeah, I'll tell that story." So after Kramer had dumped off the apples one day, Anthony Carter came over to Falk and he says, "John, who the hell is that old man who brings us the apples all the time?" Now, that's a true story. Anyway, the reason they put Schembechler and I last on the programs is we don't talk very long, and that's okay with me. But I'm so delighted to be here, to be with this tremendous guy. And if he can't do anything, well, he walks around with a cane now, you know, but he's still a hell of a bartender, believe me. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to say Don Canham is the brightest mind in the history of intercollegiate athletics. It's incumbent upon me to say that. I made a deal with him years ago when I came up over the Associated Press. I've written it in books, and our friendship is predicated on my saying that. And don't believe that the two of them bought those sport coats. No. They haven't sold those since Lewis the Hatter quit. I'm delighted that I'm at the stage in my life where I am referred to as Dr. Diles' father, so I appreciate him. It's difficult to say something. When they said, you got to say something nice, I'm reminded, Eddie Rosenberg told me the story about a friend of his who died, and he was an extremely unpopular guy. He was unpopular at work, he was unpopular in his business, at the country club, and every place, and he passed away. And so his wife went to the rabbi, and she says, I'm telling you, I want some kind of send-off for him. I want a eulogy to stop all eulogies. So the rabbi had 24 hours to try to pull something together. And he went to all these acquaintances and co-workers, and not a shot. So the funeral went on as scheduled, and the rabbi was completing his remarks, and he says, now before we take Abe to his final resting place, surely there is one among us who will have something nice to say about him. Not a murmur. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, I appeal to you. His grieving widow is here. His 3 sons, his daughter, his grandchildren. Don't let this man go to Machpelah Cemetery without a kind word. A few minutes went by and he said, I'm going to give you 3 more minutes. We're not leaving here until somebody says something nice. The guy in the back got up and he says, his brother was worse. Each year, some really good, charitable, some worthwhile organization places a significant amount of guilt on me to make a long trip from the hills of southern Ohio to come up and pay an insincere tribute to the most undeserving son of a bitch you can find. And this has been very painful for all of us. I know that you've forced yourself to laugh at unfunny jokes. If you do it out of sympathy, save some for me. But it's particularly tough, the part where we have to pretend that the terrible insults we throw at him are just in jest. You know? In the recent past, I've been prevailed upon to speak at roasts for Joe Schmidt and Hoot McInerney and Bill Bonds. By any measuring stick, 3 of the seamiest scumbags ever to inhabit the Western world. But I think tonight we have come to the end of the way. Barring an unforeseen pardon for Art Schlichter or Jack Kevorkian, I don't think we'll see each other again. It's a funny thing. I look around these old farts around here, and it's amazing. Years ago, it's true, we used to get together. Some of them won't admit this. Some of them don't remember it. But we would get together, and you'd say, Minch, you remember. You still look good. What are you smoking? Anyway, guys would get together, and you'd see each other, and you'd say, you know, where'd you go last night? And see you around, you know. Where'd you eat? You know, what'd you have to drink? Did you get a little shit-faced or something? You know, want to know what went on. And how late you stay out? Meet anybody? And now we get together, and the only thing we want to know is, did you take your medication and have you had a good bowel movement? But we gather tonight for Ron Kramer, a man once publicly described by Wayne Woodrow Hayes as the most despicable football player that he had ever encountered. It's small consolation that in death, Woody comes off as a marvelous prophet. And the temptation, and some guys have been guilty of it up here, and it's okay if you can live with yourself, but the temptation tonight, and we've all had this invitation on our desk for several months, and it took Paul Horning and Bonds and Schmidt about 6 weeks to weasel out of this thing. I got to talk to them and find out how you do that. I'm so glad to be invited anywhere. I show up anywhere. But the temptation tonight And we've all had a lot of time to prepare this. You know, we all want to outdo each other, but we want to get even with Kramer for all the nasty things he said and done to us. And there are many of them. And the man has caused a lot of embarrassment to his university and to his wide circle of friends. And to the community at large. And it's natural for us to want to stand up here and say something really crappy about it. But I came to Michigan in March of '56 with the Associated Press, and I have chronicled his career all the way. And I think possibly that in those days there wasn't such an adversarial relationship between the media and the sports community, and so we were given to more flowery phrases to describe one's exploits, and we exaggerated things, and we hid various shortcomings, and it becomes so obvious that you can't do it anymore. But my relationship with him, I think, has transcended the average relationship that somebody in the media would have with a performer. I think we have built a friendship. And I feel that that's important to Ron, because I think queers need friends. They're called fags. But the program is standard. You pick an easy target, and tonight you've selected a man who is intellectually capable of mounting a defense. And so what we have is an audience that's compelled to buy tickets out of this maize and blue thing, the loyalty. You know, hail to the victors. And I have to tell you a true story. Don Canham has been inordinately nice to me over the years. I sincerely believe he's the brightest man I've ever known. And my son got his doctorate here, so I have a fondness for the University of Michigan. I'm never been a big Ohio State fan. I don't even root for my so-called alma mater, Ohio U. Hell, we spike the ball if we get a first down. But Bo and John Falk, they've given me a lot of Michigan stuff. I have a lot of, now I get Eastern Michigan stuff, but I have Michigan hats and warm-up jackets and all that stuff. So there's a friend of mine named Lionel Boggs, and he and I go out to eat a lot. We go to, a 3-course dinner at Bob Evans. So I don't look what shirt I put on that day. I put on a pair of jeans and a shirt, and I happen to have a University of Michigan shirt. I go into Bob Evans. A guy, this has been 2 or 3 years ago, a guy from Southern Ohio, and just said, S-L-A-H-I-A, if you've ever been in my part of Ohio. The guy said, takes a lot of goddamn guts to wear that crap down here. This is Buckeye country. And so with my mouth, I said to him, I'll wear it till I find some son of it's big enough to take it off me. And Lionel Boggs turns to me and he says, "You're on your own." And he said, "I got a recommendation for you. Get your wallet out, look at your driver's license, check your date of birth, and shut the hell up." I don't want to go on anymore. Some of these roasts can get really tedious. We had a roast for Alex Karras. I had a marriage didn't last that long. But,
2 or 3. 3 marriages.
Well, you were the correspondent, too.
I know.
But the roast we had, remember the roast we had for Bobby Lane? They had 3 price seats, those over 21 and those under 21 and those who turned 21 during the program. But there are 2 roasts that I've done in recent years. for marvelous, marvelous people. People who are great assets to our community. When I say our community, I mean the state of Michigan and this whole area. These people were popular, they were positive, and they were powerful. And one was Bob Talbert, and the other was Joseph Priestley McCarthy. And they're gone now. We've really suffered a massive loss because they loved this place. They loved Michigan State. They loved anything that reflected favorably on the state of Michigan. They were great assets. And if you want to have a roast for a half asset, I'm here to pay tribute to Ron Kramer.
Damn, I'm glad we didn't start with him. We sure as hell picked up a lot of that time we lost on gained on Brandstatter, I can tell you that. I tell you, Don, if I could speak like that from the written word I write, he did a hell of a job. Well, Coach, I didn't mean to throw a curve at you to have to follow that, but by God, I can't think of a better person to stand up and to pay our last roast to Mr. Kramer than our own legend and icon and the great Michigan football coach, Bo Schembechler. Bo?
Thanks, Bob. It's great to see you again. And I know they made fun of Don and my jackets, but I can tell you for a fact, because I recognize it, that's the same blue blazer he wore for 400 banquets when he was the alumni director here at Michigan. And I think that's pretty accurate. It is the same. As a matter of fact, that's one of the travel jackets I had to the Rose Bowl, wasn't it?
It used to belong to Brandstatter.
Yeah, you had it cut down. I looked at this crowd and I was impressed with the fact that all of you came out to honor Kramer. And then I found out that Terry Barr and Tom Mintz bought half the tickets. So, Norm Masters and Earl Morrall, two Michigan State guys, and you know, I'm really impressed. I've never had an opportunity to see you guys and hear you guys before a microphone, and you both did an outstanding job. Maybe they do teach public speaking up there, I don't know. Dave Diles, you remember Dave Diles? Dave Diles, when he was down at Channel 7. Yeah, that was great. Jerry Green for 21 years. 21 years that I was the football coach at Michigan. That damn guy never wrote one single positive line about me. Not one. No, that's, well, maybe so. Maybe so. Don Canham, we were discussing football coaching today. He says, can you imagine these guys making $1 million a year to coach college football? Yeah, I said, well, they didn't coach for the Alan Greenspan of athletic directors. With all your praise, that's the truth. Jim Brandstatter was my all-time favorite player. No, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to do that. Let's just say that we enjoyed Jim more than any other player we had, because he was our entertainment. After the games on the airplanes, when we came back, providing we won. Now we're here for Kramer. I am not a roaster. I'm just an old has-been coach, so I don't know much about this roasting. I'm just going to tell you my experiences with Ron Kramer. I was a young coach just out of the service, I was coaching with Dwight Perry down here at Bowling Green. And in 1955, our season ended early. And Dwight came up to me and said, hey, I got 2 50-yard line seats for the Michigan-Ohio State game. You want to go along? I said, geez, yeah. And so I came up here. It was the first time that I sat in Michigan Stadium on the east side, meaning that was the Ohio State side. So I'm sitting in the stadium, and I'm there for one reason. I told Dwight, there are 2 great football players going to be in this game, Dwight, and I want to watch them. Howard Hopalong Cassidy at halfback for Ohio State, and Ron Kramer at defensive end for Michigan. I'm going to concentrate, and I'm going to look in there at those 2 great players. Cassidy was hurt and didn't play. Don Southern played left halfback for Ohio State, and Kramer was thrown out of the game in the first half. And that is a true story. I'm not telling jokes. The damn guy got thrown out of an Ohio State-Michigan game. So,
You're losing your memory?
no. A few years later, I'm the head coach at Miami of Ohio. And I was always interested in going places where I could learn football. What better place to go than Vince Lombardi and the Green Bay Packers? So I went up to spend a week in Green Bay, and they put me up in the dormitory where all the players were, and I ate with the players there at St. Olaf College, I think it was, St. Norbert College. And so I got there for the first practice. Vince comes out, and I'm really excited. I'm going to watch these guys. We're going to go. Now, you understand Kramer's on this team. Now, you were probably there, Master, but I wasn't concentrating on you. Kramer, Vince says, all right, men, get in that calisthenic formation. We're going to do jumping jacks now. Let's count it out. Way in the back of that formation is Kramer. And here he is. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was his jumping jack. You know how to do a jumping jack, don't you? Huh? 1, 2, 3, 4. I go back after the practice. We go back to the dormitory, and we're in the dining hall. And I'm sitting next to Vince Lombardi, and everybody is in the dining hall eating. Behind us, standing on the table, is a rookie singing his college fight song. And all of a sudden, 15 minutes after everybody had been through the line, here comes Horning and Kramer. And both of them have a cigar in their mouth. And I'll bet you Norm remembers that. They had a cigar in their mouth as they came through there, strutting through there, threw their tray down and went through the tray. And I watched Lombardi. He looked at them like this, and he followed them as they went back there. And they sneaked way to the back of the hall there to eat. And they sat down to eat. And Lombardi got up, and he walked past that kid that was singing. He said, "Shut up." That kid shut up so fast it wasn't funny. He walks down there, and he gets right up in front of Kramer and Horning. He says, "I told you 2 guys never to come in here late. Cost you $200 apiece, and if you ever do it again, I'm going to run you clear out of here." Walks back up the aisle again. He says, "Start singing." That kid starts singing again. So that was my experience with Kramer. Now, he didn't know that I was following him at that time and watching everything that he did, but that's the truth. And when I first came to Michigan, the first guy that called me really was Kramer and said, "Let's go to lunch." So we went to lunch, and he said to me, "I'm going to tell you something, Bo. No matter what happened, I'm not gonna bother you." He said, "But if you get beat and I think you're down," he said, "I'll call you then." He said, "But you don't have to worry about me." several years later, after we had won a few games, and I was pretty well established, he said to me one day, you know, Mo, by God, I could have played for you. And I said, Kramer, I don't want you to play for me. I saw how you practice. Well, it's really, this has been a fun roast. These guys are really good with the jokes and everything. And I'm sure you all enjoyed yourself. Ronald McDonald House is special, and anything you can do to help them, I think, is a good thing. And Ron Kramer, really, on the bottom line, he's my friend. You know, I made a lot of friends here, guys.
Not anymore.
Well, you know that's not true. If that's the case, don't you bring me any more apples. But he is a good friend, and I've been fortunate enough, and I came to Michigan to the Zatkoffs and the Bars and the Ments. Guys I never coached ended up being good friends of mine. Conley, all those guys. And even Robinson, that's back in prehistoric times when he and Weichel played at Michigan and Lund. But there's so many great names in Michigan football. None greater than Ron Kramer. Probably not a greater athlete has ever played here. And he's also really, really a good guy. And whether he wants to admit it or not, he is a good friend. So thank you all for coming out and enjoy.
Well, Coach, I think that'd be the fitting ending to the whole program. We could just leave now. I don't see any other reason to stick around.
Let's go.
I gotta say, I hate to drag out this damn jacket thing, but you guys can't see, but these are the only two jackets I've ever seen that still got a belt in the back. I don't want to say anything about the age of them, but... Well, it's time to get the roastee up here to respond, and I'll simply say what everybody else has ended their comments by saying. As I started out, told you that I had the privilege of being alumni director of Michigan. We now have about 600,000 living alumni. I don't know, and I know a lot of them, a single Michigan alumnus or alumna that better personifies the tradition and the spirit and the verve of being a Michigan person. He's always there to be counted on. He's always a person that not only supports his university, but his community. You look at that list of things that Ron Kramer has done for children, one organization after another, because he believes in children and the future of our country predicated on children. I know of no one that I'd rather introduce as a Mr. Michigan than Ron Kramer. Let's bring him up and let him respond. Ron Kramer.
Thank you, George Forman. You know, he used to get mad at me till he got to George Foreman's weight. I want to introduce one person, and if she'll stand up, please. Ann Miller, would you please stand up? Stay right there a second. Annie and I got a really a good thing together. I absolutely adore her, and I hope she does me. Of all these things she's heard now, she might not like all these things. Now, I'm going to tell you something. You can say what you want to right now. If you want to come up here, you got your chance. Otherwise, in the rest of your life, I don't want to hear nothing about it ever again. You understand?
I want to say one thing. I got to know you a lot better tonight. You've always told me you're a gourmet cook, and I did not know you were getting that food from a dumpster or it was given to you.
Anyway, That's Tugboat Annie, you know. Thanks, Ronald McDonald House. It's wonderful that we can raise the money for the Ronald McDonald House. It is a wonderful charity, and believe me, it takes care of kids, and that's what we're all into. Thanks to all the players that came back. That's great just to see you guys here. And a special thanks to Mrs. Jim Orwick. Where is she? Can she please stand up? Where are you? I love you, honey. Jimmy Orwick was our captain, I think, in 1957, but he played with us. He was a 4-point student, but he took 5 years to get through school. I don't know how the hell you do that, but it's absolutely wonderful. I got through in 4 years. I don't know how I ever did that either because, you know, Dave Diles obviously knows the best of everything. He really understands that I am not the brightest guy in the world, don't want to be, don't care to be, because I could sit here and take all this shit from these guys. Believe me, it is a wonderful thing here at Ronald McDonald House that we can raise money for these kids and what we can do. Look at that picture in here. Isn't he wonderful? Look at that beautiful body. Don, can you believe that body I got in my... You developed it too. And I could have played for you, Bo Schembechler. I could have played for you any day if you didn't yell and scream at me all the time. I used to go to practice and you yelled and screamed at everybody all the time. Earl Morrall, you couldn't throw the ball anyway, forget it. And you didn't pay any money for attending bar either. You remember that. Brandstatter and I go and we tend bar for him. He doesn't pay us nothing. He wants us to work, take the pictures, do this, take the garbage out. Okay, now Margaret, you do this, you do this. He stood around, hi, I'm Don Canham. Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. Brandstatter and I have been working very hard behind that bar anytime he wants to know. I am the legend himself. And he's my legend in training. My chubby legend in training. He married well. He doesn't have to be on the government pay. Thanks for taking care of him, darling. He's wonderful the way he is. Earl, I'm going to tell you something. You were a great player. I'll tell you what. I'm going to say one thing very nice. I don't usually say this. But here's a guy that played for, what, 21 years in the National Football League? He was twice the most valuable player in the National Football League, right? Twice. Here's a guy that played for 21 years. He's not in the National Football League Hall of Fame. Brains they got. They got some rippers in there, man. It's ridiculous. You should be in there. I don't like you that much, but you should be in. My kids went to... My two children actually went to Michigan State, and they turned out just like him. They've got brush haircuts. Earl hasn't changed in 50 years that I know him. You know, it's been not 40 years. It's been almost 50 years, Earl. Hi, Norm. How are you? Do you know what Norman's real name is? Norman Mastro Giovanni. Would you ever think that he is a W.O.P.? He is one of those. He can speak Italian, he can talk Italian, he can make all those things, and he was my roommate for the first year I was in Green Bay, and his little son used to sing O Canto Beer all the time, and he used to make me change his diapers. Johnny doing okay? You know, you tell some very good stories, Norm. I don't like you that much either. David, you're an idiot. How could you have a son that's a doctor? My son, the doctor, from West Virginia.
Flunked out of law school.
Oh, flunked out of law school. I can't believe you. Sometimes, you know, David, if you remember the story, I can remember the story one time when we were playing in Detroit, and Joe Don Looney. Anybody ever remember the name Joe Don Looney? I mean, the name really fit him. He was a really loony. Now, Dave Diles didn't like him. Dave Diles didn't like him. No, this is the nice story. Not when you were dating him. This is a nice story. This story, I'm going to tell you something. This guy hated him so much that he was going to get him thrown out of town. Well, Don Looney really screwed up bad. He got in a fight in some restaurant someplace on Grand River and everything like that. And Joe Don came back and Dave Diles buried him on television. You know the kind of guy Dave and I are, the relationship Dave and I have. I called him on the phone. I said, hey, Dave, this guy Looney, he's a little bit loony, but, you know, sort of lay off of him. Let's see if we can't handle this thing together. So I'm sitting on the phone. I said, hey, Joe Don, would you come over here and talk to David Diles? And Joe Don Looney gets on the phone. He says, is this David Diles? Dave Diles says, yes. He says, go F yourself, and hangs up the phone. 3 weeks, he had him out of town. 3 weeks, am I true? And the sweetheart of Sigma Chi was Jerry Green. Remember him, guys? Remember over at the house? This little guy coming around her. Hi, I'm Jerry Green from the AP. We had no idea what this guy was about. I want to tell you something. Oh, but look, I'm looking over here. I never thought that Marv Nyron would get between Shelley and Terry. Look at this. This is something new. Oh, look at this. We got a new romance going on. This is wonderful. Getting back to you, Jerry. How's your wife? She okay? Yeah, where are you living? Where do you live now? You don't live in East Detroit? You don't love me no more? You used to kiss me and hug me all the time. Jerry Green, you're wonderful. You don't always have anything to say. You're right. You don't, what? What do you want to say?
I got an exclusive interview with Joe Don Looney that time.
He got an exclusive interview of Joe Don Looney, right?
You were the only one who wanted to talk.
That's what you taught me, to be negative, verse, odd, and strange.
Well, let me tell you something. I'm just very unhappy that Joe Schmidt and Billy Bonds didn't show up. Of course, Billy Bonds sometimes can get off the deep end. He could be really wacko. But Joe Schmidt, I can't believe he didn't come here. I'll tell you what, we're liable to get him fired from his job. Do you think you can fire him, Terry? You know a funny thing about Joe Schmidt? I got to tell you about him. Maybe he's not here, but his name's on here. He was such a wacko when you came play ball with him, playing against him, that he forbid Terry Barr, who was my fraternity brother, from going out to dinner with me before a game in Green Bay. I was with Green Bay at the time, and Terry Barr was with Detroit. And he said, "You can't go out with." Terry had to sneak out of the room to go out to dinner with me. That's the kind of wacko he is. So good he ain't here. And besides that, he was the one who fired me from the Detroit Lions anyway, and he kept Jim Gibbons. I didn't like that anyway, so I'd have probably got all over his tree anyway. And Bill Bonds is the kind of a guy that doesn't have any hair, but he tries to make you think he's got hair. So you know, he wears a rug, like I do. This is my rug that I wear. And so I'm sort of happy they didn't come. And George Forman, could you come up here a second? George Forman, he's a wonderful guy. He always calls me Jack Kramer because I'm a tennis player. This guy is the best, and I want to thank you all. I want to thank the Ronald McDonald House, all my teammates, and everybody who has anything to do with this. My little sweetheart, Anna Marie, and all you guys who roasted. And you know damn good and well, I don't care what you say about me. I'm going to love you anyway.
Well,
thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that magic moment is here where we've honored Ronald McDonald Kramer. And I got a little note that says everybody to take the mugs home that's on your table if you'd like, so please do that. To the Ronald McDonald folks, thanks for bringing us all together, Dave and colleagues. And thank you, Ron, and good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, baby.
Great to see you.
We're going to start our dinner in just a minute, but I want to introduce to you the president of the Ronald McDonald House to bring greetings to all of you. Her name is Stephanie Smith, and many of you from the University of Michigan community will know that Stephanie Smith is the daughter of Alan Smith, our interim president of the University of Michigan, former dean of the law school, former vice president for academic affairs. So Stephanie Smith, president of the Ronald McDonald House.
Thank you. What an honor it is to represent the Ronald McDonald House of Ann Arbor on this, our 15th year anniversary. Ron, we thank you so much for lending your name and your presence tonight so that we could have this wonderful anniversary party and continue our fundraising and activities that support this wonderful, important organization of which I'm so proud to be a part. In 1984, the owners and operators of Southeast Michigan McDonald's, the Friends of University of Michigan Hospitals and Health Centers, the Ann Arbor Junior League, and a large number of very committed people from our community started the fundraising that allowed us to build and open the Ronald McDonald House of Ann Arbor. Since 1985, 9,000 families have found a haven there, a haven of quiet and rest and service and support and togetherness at the time when they're coping with the illness of a beloved child, the time that they need that kind of service the most. And we thank you so much for being here to help support that ongoing activities of our house here in this community. There are several people that we certainly need to say thank you to because we wouldn't all be here if they hadn't done so much work. I'm going to ask them to stand, and I'm going to ask them to stay standing and hold your applause until we're finished. Three people in particular who gave us leadership in getting to this evening. Caprice Warren is the immediate past president of the organization, under whose leadership the vision and the planning for this event has taken place. Dave McDowell, who's the executive director of the Ronald McDonald House and manages to keep 5,000 balls in the air all at the same time, and of whom we all depend all the time. And finally, Ann Preston, who is the chair of our development committee and on our board, and who with her team did all of the planning for this organization. And there she is in the corner. She had a large team of people, of volunteers who worked with her. Would all of you please stand? Come on, there, absolutely. And finally, I'd like to ask the members of the board of directors, there are a number of you here, both present board members and past board members, who give so much time and energy and expertise to making the house run. Would you stand for a moment so we can say thank you?